If you didn't know the stakes, you sometimes wouldn't be able to tell the difference between high stakes and low stakes. Or would you? Was this hand played at NL50 or NL40K? Well, if you guessed low stakes, that is absolutely false. This hand was played by two longtime crushers of the game, Linus Lödiger aka Linus Love and Sergei Nikiforov aka Moonestar. Today we have three more hands that could have been played at NL50 or below, or at NL10K or above. And to get another perspective on that matter, I have invited Gleb, who runs the YouTube channel Chai Poker Academy and is an amazing teacher for theoretical poker concepts and how to apply them in real environments. So let's see if he and you can guess whether these following hands are high stakes or low stakes.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is known as a 3-bet.
Right, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Exactly.
So I guess I do know my heads up.
That's still the same, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, alright. Getting a little aggressive. Check jam. With Queen 9. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. That's kind of fun. Already a lot going on. I can tell that there's going to be a lot of money thrown around in the video. Definitely an interesting line. From the flop all the way to the river. I know if we're playing this sort of spots in big blind versus button, a lot of people are going to use a small c-bet size. Some people are going to use a larger c-bet size. And the EV of both of those is roughly similar, but of course going for a small bet size can be a lot easier. I think it's kind of interesting to play the check raise with the second pair. I definitely see this happen a lot in the 6-max sims, but not necessarily the heads up because I haven't really studied them. And then using the hand as a bluff catch on the river, I think is just going to depend a lot on the player tendency. In general, I would expect to see that this line is going to be pretty under bluffed. It's quite difficult to imagine enough like bluffs for the value that the button player has, or I guess the small blind player, since we're talking about heads up. So it's definitely interesting to see the bluff catch, but without information on what these people think to each other, it's just going to be pretty tough to know.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I thought pretty similarly about this hand. So yeah, probably also too early to have a sense of whether this could be low stakes or whether this could be high stakes, right? So
I do have some ideas about it. So right away, I'm going to say high stakes, because first of all, it's a bit more of a rare line. But then second of all, I don't necessarily know if I would expect a lot of bluff catches like this happen on the river at lower stakes. Of course, we're looking for hands which might be a bit unique, so it's not necessarily representative of the larger sample. But that would be my initial thoughts, and I guess we can circle back to it at the end.
Sure, yeah, makes sense. All right. So before we go to hand number 2, let's quickly compare the play we saw to GTO. And working with GTO Wizard's research ranges to account for the small 3-bet, we'll see that Queen 9 off is 3-betting here for a tiny amount of the time. Ace 10 is mostly calling, and on the flop, the big blind could almost bet their entire range, including Queen 9 off. The small 15% sizing is also nailing it. Ace 10 would mix depending on the combo, and the buttons combo is mostly calling. On the turn, Queen 9 could actually go for another small value bet of 1/3 pot. Preflop ranges were wide because it's heads up and because of the small 3-bet size. And flop ranges were also very wide because of the very small c-bet size. All of which makes the big blind still have a range advantage, which allows to even value bet Queen 9. Against the check, Ace 10 would be a pure bet for value, and Queen 9 would then never raise. It either calls or just folds. We also don't see similar hands that are taking this line. Some Queen Jack, King Queen and King 10 could go for a check raise, but those also block straights and have a straight draw themselves. Against the raise, Ace 10 would just call, as played. But lower aces would have to fold. And on the river, Queen 9 is not in there anymore, but almost all single pairs that got here are just checking. Ace 10 can jam for value. And again, there is no Queen 9 in here, but almost all Queen X and lower are folding. So considering the river call and the turn play, it is safe to say that this hand was not played GTO and was either an intentional exploit or just a mistake. And does that make you think this hand was played at high stakes or at low stakes?
And this is known as a 4-bet, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what people call those, yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, 4-bet pots, I know the ranges are really, really wide playing heads up. Super interested to see how it plays out.
It's gonna be interesting.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm gonna just take a guess and then I'll say my explanation. Sure. I'm gonna say that this is high stakes. There's a lot of 4-betting happening and the heads-up sims, and the ranges can be quite wide. I know that as you progress through higher and higher stakes, people are generally a little bit better at finding those niche 4-bet bluffs. Now, as someone who has not studied the pre-flop ranges for heads-up, I have no idea if this is something that happens at Nash or not. I know exploitatively it can definitely make sense if people are over-folding, even if it is not something that happens. But I just don't expect to see this level of aggression pre-flop. In addition, the turn line of going for the jam definitely happens on lower connected boards, sometimes in 3-bet pots as well. I have not studied the sim, so I don't know if this is going to be the best size or best strategy. But going for B50 on the flop and then jam on the turn seems fairly specific, and it seems like there's some theoretical thought behind it. So I would probably say that this is going to be a high-stakes hand.
All right, fair enough, yeah. In this hand, Jack 7 suited is not a 4-bet, and 6-8 suited is also not even a call pre-flop. So I just added both of these in for 25% to see how they would play post-flop. The button would prefer a 25% flop c-bet instead of 40, both for the range in general and for Jack 7 specifically. So I changed the sim to only c-bet 40% pot. But even then, Jack 7 would simply never c-bet. And against the c-bet, 6-8 of hearts would then almost always just jam. Looking at the scenario where the big blind just calls and it goes to the turn, we'll see Jack 7 not in there anymore, but also no other similar hands are just jamming. Queen high is just check, 2 combos of king high actually jam, but those have a club blocker, which is relevant, but some tiny amounts of ace high do actually jam without a club. Now 6-8 actually becomes a fold in theory, as do similar hands like 6-7 and 6-5. Only king 6 would be able to call, likely because of the king being a better value blocker. But overall, we can agree that this hand was not played GTO at all. But does that make it a low stakes hand? Or a hand played on high stakes?
Okay. the jam. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Everything that I thought I knew about this hand just got flipped on its head. Is this GTO? I guess it would be really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. So the thing that stands out to me, of course, is going to be that turn bet. If we're playing 6 max, then I'm fairly certain that this hand wouldn't prefer to take that line. I'm assuming that on the overcard, it would probably be using a small bet out of position more. I would have to double check the sim, because this is probably one of the spots that I struggle with a little bit since I take a pretty heavy MDA approach here. River Jam, very interesting. I don't know, man. I don't know if this is the thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So for me, the River Jam was definitely the thing that stuck out the most. And when I saw it, I was like, that is not happening. But then again, as we said before, I'm not an expert in heads up, but I was pretty sure that this is not happening because when you think about it, just from level one, you have pocket queens. This runout is like really bad in the sense that so many hands improve for your opponents. So your opponent has a lot of better hands than pocket queens. At the same time, you as well have so many better hands. So it's not like your opponent is gonna think you are gonna be over bluffing here or don't have any value. So value betting here with pocket queens, I don't really think is that much of a thing. And at the same time, if you were trying to bluff this hand for whatever reason, first of all, I don't think it's necessary at all because there are so many 10x, maybe even Jack X that got there on the river, maybe even some random 8x hands, or maybe maybe a hand of a pair of fours is also calling here in heads up and just checking it down. So you have a lot of showdown value. There's no real need to bluff. So when bluffing doesn't make sense and value betting doesn't make sense either, it's very hard to find a reason for betting here. And therefore, I think this is not a real thing. For the turn, I could see that more often. It's probably not too intuitive. So my personal approach would be to check here as well. But for me, the river was much more interesting here.
I guess a few specific notes for heads up. So on the turn, like it's not necessarily out of reach to bet pocket queens. I know that if you were to look at a 6 max sim, the size might be a little bit too big. Like I said, I would probably expect to see some smaller bets. But heads up, the ranges are so much wider, right? Like it is possible that your hand is still good enough for B75, getting called by a lot of 10x, 8x, like Jack 8, I guess. I don't know the ranges super well. Then when you get to the river, out of position, it is a little bit tricky, right? Because the value and bluff threshold will get so incredibly merged. It can be very intuitive to just check with medium showdown value. And a lot of times the EV regret of betting is going to be a lot higher than like the EV of checking is just going to be a lot bigger. But sometimes it's not necessarily the case. So if the range sees very significant improvements, then we could see a lot of bets, even with hands like pocket queens that would fold out, maybe something a little bit stronger. Again, I don't know if this is a thing. It would depend a lot on the range versus range composition. And I don't know that at heads up, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point. And those spots or figuring those out are some of the most difficult, I think, because the solver is obviously very good at finding those because it just calculates everything. And if you look at the results, then you can maybe find the explanation in there and you may be able to understand it, but to find it in game as well, that is just another level, right? So but yeah, good point. That might actually what's been going on here for sure.
Yeah, I really want this to be a high stakes hand. I really, really do.
In this hand, the button opened to 3 big blinds pre-flop, but still queens are 100% 3-betting. Against that, Jack 8 off, however, wouldn't be a call, but instead have to fold. 10-8 could be calling sometimes though, so it's not the worst mistake. On the flop, a bigger bet size, like a pot bet, would be preferred. But if we only allow the option of 2/3 and 1/3 pot, queens would always bet 2/3. Jack 8, just like any pair, would call. And on the turn, queens would actually continue betting 100% of the time, even for this big sizing. Jack 8 would only be a call with some combos, and apparently blocking high equity draws with the Jack of diamonds or spades is the deciding attribute for calling here. And on the river, jamming queens is simply not a thing. At least not without a diamond. With a diamond, the EV of checking and jamming is actually close. Why? Well, if we look closely, we'll see that in theory, the button would call some worse hands, such as Queen Jack, Jack 10, Ace 10, 10 9, and even some Ace 8. And at the same time, it would actually fold out some better hands, like many King X, and even Jack 8 off would be a fold without a diamond. So does knowing about this merge dynamic that is going on in Solver World make you believe that this hand was played at high stakes? Or was it simply a low stakes hand?
I'm fairly confident that this is going to be the high stakes hand. The small turn bet seems like a pretty exploitative move. The small turn raise seems like a pretty good exploitative move. The bluff catch on the river just seems like, hey, we're playing a game of aggression. I don't necessarily see this happen at smaller stakes.
All right. Got it. And then the second one was the Jack 7 versus 8 6.
Yep. I think from everything I've seen, this just points to it being a high stakes hand. I think the sizing in particular, and then the hands that both people have here, is just indicative of higher stakes play.
All right, got it. And then hand number 3, we had the
My
queens.
favorite one by far.
Nice, I like that.
So this is the hand that I really, really, really want to be high stakes, and I hope I'm proven wrong, but I got to go with Occam's Razor and just say that it is a low stakes hand. The line just doesn't add up in my head. I don't know, man. This is out of my expertise.
Right, yeah. I mean, makes sense, right? It would be pretty savage of me to just put in 3 high stakes hands here, right? So if you go,
it's possible though. It's possible.
You never know, man. You gotta randomize. Then let me reveal hand number 1 to you.
Oh, let's go.
Linus versus Stefan.
Linus, okay, of course. Of course. It just has to be. I love it. Of course, Stefan would make the call. That's Stefan, man. That's classic Stefan right there.
Exactly. Also the small 3-bet.
Pre-flop. It's super exploitative, right? Like pinning those 10x down, forcing a lot of hands into the weak situation. And then I'm assuming that the perception is that Stefan is going to have a very weak range after they check, raise, and then check. Definitely a lot of that King X of diamonds, Jack X of diamonds, but not today. Sorry,
exactly.
Stefan.
Point for you. You got this one perfectly right.
Man,
now let's jump into hand number 2, which you said was also high stakes. And that is played at NL50.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I don't know.
NL50, that's pretty high stakes too, right?
I mean, it's all debatable, but yeah, I don't know. These guys, I found this somewhere on YouTube. And yeah, just some guys playing on 50 NL Zoom.
All right. I like it though, you know? Some aggressive Zoom play. You know, people are used to this sort of pool being quite nitty, so it's nice to see hands like this play out.
For sure. Yeah, makes sense. Exactly. And as you said, a lot of people would maybe overfold the turn, maybe arrive there with too much of a wide range. So why not?
Love the call.
Yeah, for sure.
I wonder what the green tag is.
Yeah, you never know. In my experience, green was always the tag for recreationals, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah. Who knows? Maybe this is different. Right, so now to your favorite hand, and I have to say this one was a little bit unfair,
Mm-hmm.
a little tricky,
Okay.
because it is actually what you wanted it to be, which is high
Oh,
stakes.
okay.
In fact, it is NL100K,
Oh my goodness.
but
Crazy. Yeah.
but it's from 15 years ago. So it
Hmm.
is Isildur against Dur. I don't know
Hmm.
if
Of course,
you've
yeah.
seen some of that
Mm-hmm.
back in
I
the
haven't seen
day.
it, but legendary player, of course.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And this is
Four
the
hundred
hand.
thousand dollars in the stack.
Exactly.
My goodness. This is pre-solver work right here.
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm. Really just assuming that there's going to be a massive overfold on the river, I guess. But Jack 8, that's kind of a crazy hand.
Well, my first thought was actually that this was at that time. I don't know. I haven't played these stakes, obviously, and especially not at that time. But from what I think and what I saw of this match, especially, I
Mm-hmm.
would have thought that this was just a pure value bet because these guys were going crazy, like
Oh.
really insane stuff going on. You
Mm-hmm.
saw some pre-flop jams with 10-9 suited for, I don't know, 200 big blinds or something. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
Wild stuff. And I just thought when I saw this, I thought what we were discussing, that this is probably not a GTO thing, but
Mm-hmm.
that this at this time he just so Isildur just expected Dwan to just call any pair or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he speculated on him overfolding or anything, but I could be very
Yeah.
much wrong. That was just my first impression.
That is so interesting. I really got to see this one.
Thank you, Gleb, for joining. And if you want to see me guess his high stakes and low stakes hands, check out this video we made on his channel. And on another note, because of the menu requests, the merch will be back in store for a short time. It will only be available until next week, so if you'd like some GTO merch, make sure to get it now.